Hello, and welcome to Keep the Channel Open, a podcast featuring conversations with artists, writers, and curators. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 44. Today's guest is Scott B. Davis. Hey folks, so today's guest is Scott B. Davis, who, among other things, is the founder of the Medium Festival of Photography here in San Diego. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you have definitely heard me mention the Medium Festival many times, and there's a reason for that. It's not just, one of the highlights of my entire year, although it certainly is that. It's also one of the main venues in which I get to connect with the photographic community. More than a third of the guests on this show I met for the first time at Medium, whether they were presenting artists or portfolio reviewers or just fellow attendees like me, getting to spend a long weekend just, talking about photography, looking at photography, listening to lectures about photography, all of that. It's just so inspiring and so energizing for me. Every year I come away, I'm just so amped up, I'm ready to go, so many new ideas. And that, it really gets at how necessary community is for artists. Because whatever we might see in the movies or read in stories, art isn't really about being a lone genius. I mean, I guess maybe for a few people it is, but that has never been my experience. For most of us, art is really about connection, and not just the connection between the artist and the audience, but also from artist to artist. That camaraderie and support that you get from getting to know people who are doing the same kind of thing that you're doing. It's just so important. Getting to, celebrate each other's successes, crying on each other's shoulders when things aren't working. It's just fantastic, and it's necessary. I honestly don't think I'd have been able to keep at it if not for the help and support and friendship of my artistic peers. And, while my experience is mainly in the photo world, I know it's like this for people working in other disciplines as well. I hear writers talk about conferences like AWP or the various science fiction and fantasy conventions or whatever. So I'd like to put it out there to you folks listening. Where do you find your community? If you're an artist, what do you get out of events like this? Which are your favorite ones and why? Use the hashtag ChannelOpenPod on Twitter and chime in. I'd love to hear about it. So as I mentioned, Scott B. Davis is the guest today. Now, Scott's not just the founder and director of Medium. He's also a fantastic photographer in his own right, and also just a great guy. I'm really happy to get to call him a friend. In his own work, he makes platinum prints and more recently platinum paper negatives. But his work, it just doesn't look at all like any other platinum prints I've ever seen. A lot of his earlier work is night shots with these really deep shadows, very moody, atmospheric, very psychological, whether it's desert or urban landscapes. One series along those lines that we talked about in the show is his series Land of Sunshine, a series of night photographs in Los Angeles, and there's a link to that in the show notes. And more recently, he sort of flipped things. He makes these platinum paper negatives that are pushed almost to paper white. And two series using that new technique are Ocotillo and Tracings of Light, both of which we discuss in our conversation. And there are also links for those in the show notes. So before we get started, I wanted to mention first that the Medium Festival runs from October 26th to the 29th here in San Diego this year at the Lafayette Hotel. The portfolio review part, that's already fully booked, but you can get on the waiting list if you want to. And registration for the rest of the festival will open in just a few weeks on August 18th. You can get all the information for the whole festival at mediumsandiego.org. I will be there, and if you have any interest in photography, I hope I'll see you there as well. Also, as part of the festival, there is the annual Size Matters exhibition, which is a curated selection of works smaller than 10 inches. There is an open call for entry for that exhibition now. Submissions are open until Saturday, July 28th. And there are awards available. Yes, one selected work will be presented with the Purchase Award with a $500 cash prize and the work donated to a prominent museum collection. There's a Director's Choice Award that will include 2 VIP passes to next year's festival, and one honorable mention will receive a significant award from one of the festival's supporters. There's a link in the show notes for that as well. I do encourage any interested photographers to submit to that. Okay, so if you want to follow along and tweet your comments and questions as you listen, you can use the hashtag #ChannelOpenPod on Twitter to join the conversation. And now here's my conversation with Scott B. Davis. How you been lately?
Life's been really good.
Yeah?
Yeah, can't complain.
Yeah. I could probably find some things to complain about, but sometimes I say, like, I could complain, but then I would be an asshole.
Well, I don't know if complaining makes you an asshole by nature, but you know, I have a friend, when I run into him, the glass is always half empty. It's like, you know, things could be better.
Yeah.
This is a man who lives in a very nice condo.
Yeah.
Doesn't worry about money at all. And on and on.
Yeah, it can get a little exhausting sometimes to try to be positive when I can, but yeah. So I'm trying to think of what I wanted to sort of lead off with, because there's so many. Like I was thinking a lot about your work and about Medium, obviously. So I've known you since the beginning of Medium.
Yeah, I know. You've been there since the beginning.
Yeah, I missed 1 year, but
oh, did you?
Yeah, I missed. Well, I came. It was the second year.
Okay.
It was the first time when you guys were in the Lafayette.
Got it.
And I didn't do the portfolio reviews that year, but I did come to some of the, like I came to the portfolio walk that was at Third Space. But so this year, it's always like when I missed it that year, and I was really bummed. It's really one of the best things about that I get to do every year.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to it again this year. This year I decided I wasn't going to do the portfolio reviews just because I don't have any new work. But
yeah, that's an intense experience too.
It is, yeah. But also I because it's such a small, like it's such an intimate kind of thing, and there's not room for a ton of different people. I kind of sometimes because I've done them 4 times now, I feel maybe I should just make a little room for somebody who hasn't gotten a chance yet.
Yeah.
But I'm super looking forward to it because the lectures too are so fantastic. We were just saying, like, I wish I could revisit them.
Yeah. I'm very excited about the lineup this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to sort of back up before we talk a lot about Medium and just sort of talk about you as an artist.
Okay.
So it was really through Medium that I was inspired to sort of look you up more and know about you. And a lot of that is just because before Medium, I wasn't really that connected with the art scene. But I really like your work. I mean, I've said that to you before.
Yeah.
No, you know, one of the things that, you know, when I was thinking about, you know, I was looking over your website again, just, you know, this morning, just to sort of refresh my memory a little bit. And the main thing that really I was thinking about as I was looking at your website is how the website is really not a good way to see your images. That because of the way that you print them, they really need to see them in person.
Yeah.
And so I guess like the first thing that I was thinking of as I was thinking about that, how, you know, you do platinum prints. What was it that first sort of drew you to platinum? And like, was that where you started, or what?
Well, it's where I found my voice. I mean, what drew me to it is, let me back up. What drew me to photography was a kind of F-64 leaning, you know, of really wanting to make these kind of technically perfect, pristine views of things. And in going down that rabbit hole, this is in the early 90s, just to put it in perspective. I was 2 decades behind the curve because the people who were consummate printmakers were complaining about the disappearance of good quality materials in the early 1970s. And so here in the early 90s, I'm using, what I perceive to be and what were generally considered the best quality materials. And they weren't as good as things used to be. And then I saw an ad in a magazine, to further date things, that that said old master quality is not for everyone. And it had a reproduction of a Rembrandt etching in a photography magazine for a photographic process. And it confused me. And that confusion is exactly what led me to say, well, what does this mean? I had seen this ad many times. And so I finally looked into it and saw that it was, a hand-coded, handmade printmaking process. And I thought, well, maybe that would be an interesting addition or layer to my work, is to use this, process where the manufacturers, the Ilfords and Agfas of the world, can't strip away the best parts of the process. In the case of traditional photography, the silver, right, out of the paper or the film. And that's what got me hooked on it. As soon as I did it, it satisfied this desire I had to be more involved with the process. I mean, at that point, I was already using view cameras, so I was loading my own film and processing sheets one at a time and doing all that the labor-intensive side of photography that had been practiced by a lot of the 20th century greats, let's call it. Anyhow, and that kind of slid concurrently with an interest in representing the world through a perspective, through my own opinions and sets of eyes. And making pristine pictures of nature didn't fulfill that for me. And I, just became more socially aware, more environmentally aware, and kind of started making pictures that, still were emulating other people, which you could argue we all do until we die.
Yeah, you kind of have to.
Yeah, I mean, and none of us work in a vacuum. And if we did, it wouldn't even be interesting to ourselves. But anyhow, so, my pictures started to change. And the real change came when I made a night photograph at a scenic overlook, thinking that I was going to get a picture of the scenic overlook in, like, black on black haunting, wickedness. And what I got was the Imperial Valley in the distance glowing with, 200,000 people living in it. And the amazing thing is that I was sitting there next to the camera for an hour, imagining what I thought was being recorded on the film. And I never saw a city out there. And when I processed that sheet of film and saw this thin black line going through it, I was stunned because I thought that I knew how to look. I thought I was really truly using my eyes and my mind together. And, it taught me to look more carefully. And that basically launched me into, 20 years of making night photographs.
Yeah.
And that led me, well, it didn't lead me, it dovetailed nicely with interest in minimalism and pushing process, the photographic process into places that it had not been before per se. And by that I mean platinum in particular, because most platinum prints seem to represent things like calla lilies. Or luscious clouds, or, I mean, they understandably, photographers use the process to exploit its subtle rendering of tones. And so you look for subjects that have subtle renderings of tones. Brick walls and things don't do it as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the idea of making black on black pictures was really, really appealing to me. And if we leapfrog over that beginning in the 90s to the present, where I'm making negatives with platinum coated pieces of paper inside of a large view camera, again, sitting in the landscape for hours. Now I'm making pictures that are almost purely white.
Yeah.
Because it takes hours for an image to, resolve itself in any fashion. But that's kind of getting ahead of things.
Do you find it's an interesting thing that you were just saying that about this sort of happy accident that led you onto this, but do you find that still a real active part of your photography, or do you find, because I feel like a lot of for myself, when I was first starting, I would tend to notice things in the pictures later on that I hadn't intended initially,
right.
But that as I sort of learned to sort of be more observant, that I find that I'm noticing those things usually as I'm taking the picture or before rather than after. But I still get some of those accidents, and I still, a lot of times those are the ones that end up being in the series or whatever. But I find that I'm often less surprised as I go forward. Do you still find that chance and accident plays a big role in your work?
It does, in the best of circumstances. And, it's a really tricky place to try and maintain, right? That sense of discovery and wonder and not knowing, right? I.e. trying to create accidents or the unexpected. I mean, the first 2 years that I made paper negatives, I've been doing it for about 4 years now. I didn't know what I was doing. Like I didn't know what the process would result in by pointing the camera at a given subject, which is typically a plant in the desert, for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. I didn't know what it would do. And the results were like really mixed. Sometimes it would do something amazing, and other times it would be like, it's a purely white piece of paper. And that sense of not knowing lasts for a certain amount of time, but eventually you have to figure out what's going. And it's that figuring out that's exciting for me, especially in the day and age of all things digital. You can get answers to pretty much any question through your, Siri device or your Echo, or whatever the other ones are called, right? You don't even have to use your fingers anymore. Now you just talk, and you say, "What's the answer to this question?" And some computer gives you, the best rendering of the answer that it can. There is no answer for making platinum paper negatives.
Yeah,
and I like that.
Yeah,
it's an exciting place to be because it results in a lot of accidents and a lot of trial and error. Eventually I figured out what was going on, and it makes sense in hindsight that sheets of platinum are sensitive to ultraviolet light. They're not sensitive to visible light. So I was using this to take pictures of the invisible, and I didn't know that for 2 years, even though I've taught platinum and practiced it for 20 plus years. I didn't ever put those two together like, oh, right, this only is sensitive to ultraviolet light, because to make a platinum print, you just need a negative and UV light, right? The negative is providing your image. The UV light is providing the exposure. When you don't have a negative, in other words, when you're pointing it at something in the world, then you just have the UV light. So anyway, that was, that left me in a place of like, kind of permanent accidents because we can't see ultraviolet light. And so the idea of photographing the invisible became very appealing to me. And there's a lot of other variables too, like, making a photograph pointed south is different than a photograph pointed north because the sun's either in your face or it's behind you. And then the time of year is going to affect that too, because of, in the summer, the sun's virtually directly overhead at our latitude. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of variables that are beyond my control. And honestly, I love that. I love it because we live in a world where everything is in our control, right?
It seems that way, at least.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of backup cameras on our cars. You know, it's like you don't even have to use your skills and your mind and your brain. You can just look in the little screen. Yeah. And it's like, okay, no, I'm not going to hit the car yet. Not going to hit the car yet. Still not going to hit it. And then it'll probably beep at you, like, when you're a centimeter away from actually hitting the car. I mean, and that does remarkable things for our world, but it also takes away a lot of the mystery, and it takes away a lot of the inherent skills, and it takes away like some of that necessary cognition of just using our minds. And I love that I still have to do all that. In fact, I have to do it even more so because I've found myself in this funny little rabbit hole, where I just don't have answers. And for the first couple of years, I used to say, if you Google platinum paper negative, it's not that nothing comes up. They used to call that a Google whack, where 2 words yield 1 result. I don't even know if there's any Google whacks left, but platinum paper negative yields different answers. Yeah. Online. Yeah. And nobody's written about it online or otherwise because there's kind of nothing to write about. It's, it's a preposterous idea.
It's, I mean, I guess, like if it's sort of an interesting thing to think about, that it presents you, when you're doing something that people don't do or haven't done, or at least haven't done a lot of. Yeah. It presents some challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. And not least which, like, if, for an artist who wants to sell their work, there's not that helps, I'm sure. Yeah. I thought it was really interesting to sort of compare your newer work, your newer sort of coupleless desert series, Ocotillo, and the other one, the name is, I'm forgetting.
Tracings of Light?
Yeah. Comparing those to the work that I'd been more familiar with, that it's interesting to me that they feel extremely different to me, but also extremely the same. Yeah. Which I just find fascinating, how you can sort of chart an artist's voice through really big changes in their work. I just find that really interesting. So like your older work is very characterized by being very dark. Like, I mean, sort of, and I was thinking about that, how it's visually, like, tonally dark, but also kind of psychologically, there's a lot in there, I feel like, where your new work, a lot of it, and some of them with, when in these diptychs that you do, is you're doing comparisons between light and dark, but by and large, most of the prints are very, as you were saying, very white, very close to white. Yeah. And I was just sort of wondering, like, after working for such a long time in sort of one sort of style, was it just like getting antsy, getting tired of doing that, or did you have some kind of a moment? Or
there's no moment. I mean, it's, to speak specifically to the question, the underlying current in all of my work is discovery, and process drives my work as well. The platinum printing process, at least at this moment in time, and for the last many years. And I started making night photographs in the desert, and then I kind of shifted my interest to Los Angeles because it felt really good to see Los Angeles in a way that it's not typically represented. You know, to see it in darkness and to discover things about LA that make it look like the city that I know that's kind of just another American city. I mean, obviously LA has a lot of layers to it.
Are you originally from up there, or
No.
are you from down here, or
Nope.
okay?
You get one more shot.
I give up.
Yeah. I grew up in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C.
All right.
I've lived here for 30 years. So
I would not have. I would not have gotten.
Yeah, no, I was playing with you. But no, and you know, so Los Angeles it's a city that I'm an outsider to, and that's part of the joy. Also, you know, the notion of what Los Angeles looks like is going to be largely familiar to most people, right? You close your eyes and you think about L.A. and you're thinking about blue skies, palm trees, plastic surgery, shiny cars. You know, I mean, there's images that are iconographic to Los Angeles, just like there are to New York and Chicago and Seattle and other cities. And I wasn't interested in that. And I found something in Los Angeles that allowed me to discover it almost like landscapes in the desert, you know, of looking for things to find and just delighting in what you find.
Yeah.
What was there. So, so, you know, with this new work that are white photographs, it's about discovery too, but it's a different kind of discovery because it's photographing things we can't see, ultraviolet light. And also discovering what this process can do when you use it in a way that it's not designed to be used.
Yeah.
So it takes a very particular DNA to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's true of all of us. I don't say that in a self-centered way. But, you know, to deal with a lot of failure and to still have the interest and the curiosity. I think most people who are drawn to photography, they like predictability. They like to understand what the results are going to look like. You know, photography is a medium that lends itself to control.
Yeah.
Because when it's not controlled, generally the results don't look good.
Yeah. I find in talking to people, it's a funny thing because like I'm always sort of questioning how broad a view I have on things. So I don't know if this is just if this is a real read on things or if it's just a product of who I know and what kinds of stuff I like to look at. But I find a real big split where a lot of photographers are, like you say, really interested in controlling the outcome, and then a few of them are just kind of like, let's just see what happens. I was thinking of Claire Warden. You know her, right? Yeah, and like her.
So I was on the phone with when you walked in.
Yeah. Like her stuff is all very sort of unpredictable, and I guess some street photographers too kind of seem to like that sort of chaotic thing. But I think you're right that the sort of the mechanics of the medium, at least you know, for a lot of people, it does really lend itself to that sort of approach. I think it's really fascinating looking at your work, how, you know, the thing you were saying about seeing the LA the way you see it, and trying to get away from the tropes that are sort of more standard. A lot of that work, you're even taking those iconic tropes and doing something like you have the one photograph that's of the Hollywood sign at night, and some of them do involve, you know, palm trees in silhouette. Yeah. But it makes it feel very different. There's almost sort of like a loneliness to it, which is not what you usually think of with LA. I really enjoy that. And the new work too, there's something about, and this was something I was reading your statements for them this morning, which I hadn't done before. And the thing, you said something about it being, sort of communicating something about the intensity of the desert that I hadn't really ever been able to put my finger on before, but that really rang true for me. And especially how, because you're going so close to the paper white, that so much is in this sort of diffuse detail of it. I don't know. I really like the desert. I find that people either really like the desert or think that it's awful.
Yeah.
So there's something about it when I find people who are doing work in that landscape that isn't, like, I mean, we all love Ansel, but like, his photographs of desert scenes are very iconic and for a reason, but like,
right.
There's already been an Ansel, so we don't really need more Ansels.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. With this work, the other thing that's really, really driven it is an interest in design and thinking more about art beyond photography and just how you can use light sensitive materials in a stark landscape like the desert with an interest in design. I'm thinking of people like Ray Metzger and Harry Callahan and others that have influenced me for a long time. But their interest was in representation, but it was also in design. And that's kind of another sort of brave new territory that's really exciting to participate in and to explore. Because again, it's about discovering things. Like the idea for me of representing something is it's just waned in interest a lot. And it's been a great challenge to think of, well, how can I use this medium that's so beloved to me in a way that it's not creating a representation of what something looks like, but more a representation of what it feels like.
Yeah. I think that is I think the most exciting photographers that I see are the ones who are not necessarily trying to transcend representation, but at least reckoning with what it means, and sort of trying to I kind of hate it when people dip into the $10 words, but like trying to grapple with the sort of ontology of photography as a medium and what representation and indexicality, all of those, how they function to the audience and to the artist. I mean, I don't know. There's something about, and that manifests in a lot of different ways, a lot of different people's work. But, for me, just finding a technically beautiful or perfect pictures, it's gotten kind of uninteresting.
Well, photography today lends itself to that because, the perfection of digital, the inherent perfection of it is kind of built in, right, to a lot of photographs. It's not to say that capturing light, managing light, managing people, being an art director, understanding landscape. It's not to say that those are not valid. Of course, they're as valid as they've ever been. But the inherent nature of photography is perfection. When we look at a digital file and there's something imperfect about it, whether it's, a chromatic aberration, a dead pixel, whatever it might be, we think, well, how can I fix that? And in analog photography, it was usually, or it is, more often seen as a bit of character.
Well, now at least.
Now, yeah.
Like maybe 30 years ago, it was...
Right, you would spot your prints.
Yeah.
Do all of that. But, there was a limit to what you could get rid of in spotting your prints. There's a handful of Ansel prints that, we know are spotted, or the classic where he removed the LP the letters L and P from the landscape in Lone Pine because he wanted it to look more pure. And he meticulously did this, and it's kind of, for people that have the privilege of looking at an original print with nothing between them and it, it's something that I'll admit I've done it. I want to see the spotting. I want to find those letters LP in that print because I just want to delight in knowing that Ansel's hand was there and see how good did he do it.
Yeah.
But the thing about digital also that I think is really worth bringing up in terms of my own opinions is that I think the birth of it and the widespread use of it are what has given rise to so much more creativity in photography.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree with that.
And that is like one of the most exciting things. I mean, what I'm doing now with paper negatives and, all the people, the so-called paper torturers and others who have been doing it for 10, 20, 30 plus years, going back to Heineken, going back to Man Ray, et cetera. The explosion of interest in this today, I think, is largely because of digital. The Robert Heinekens and the Man Rays of the world and others were like really, really pioneering people, in their ideas and their interests. But, the day and age that we live in, it's, the lid's been lifted. There's a lot more interest in saying, well, what can I do with these materials, with this beloved medium of photography?
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly didn't come up with this idea, but I've used it in writings before that I have this conception that just in the same way that analog photography, the advent of analog photography in the late 19th century, really freed up painting from having the burden of being the best form of representation.
Yeah.
That now digital photography is doing something similar to photography in general. And you see digital artists doing, it's not just limited to analog artists, I think.
Right.
But I think it's really cool. And unfortunately, you have some of these sort of old timers who really want to say like, oh, well, is this even photography anymore? Or, and which I really feel like is beside the point. It's really at that point, to me, the question is it art? And, and, what is the art doing and saying? That's the interesting question.
Yeah.
And
I think, speaking narrowly, that's what we've been moving toward for decades, right?
Yeah.
Is answering this question once and for all, is photography art? I mean, 150 years ago, there were people that said, absolutely, it is. And I think digital helped end that question because there is such a preponderance of creativity. And that includes in the digital realm, of course, of the risks that people take with regular pictures. Shooting into the sun seems to be like one of the big ones. I mean, it used to be a risky endeavor with film. And now it's an endeavor that can really introduce a feeling.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I could probably keep talking about this, but I want to make sure we talk about medium too, because that's obviously, a huge deal. It's a huge deal in my life. I can only imagine how huger it is in your life.
I only think about it once a year.
Right. So Medium Festival of Photography, this is going to be the 6th year. Yeah. And it's here in San Diego.
Yep.
It's a wonderful photography community coming together. Incorporates portfolio reviews and lectures. You always, every year, get a really great lecture lineup and just an outstanding keynote lecture.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to what it looks like this year. But I have to say too, I'm not sure if I've ever put this to you exactly this way, but I really have to thank you. I've thanked you in general before for Medium, but this show would not exist if not for Medium.
Yeah, thank you.
Because it really came out of my whole drive to do this show was the kinds of conversations I would have just sitting around the lobby in Medium, whether it was between review sessions or talking about the lecture that we just saw.
Right.
It was really the realization that those were the most interesting conversations that I get to have all year long that prompted me to want to do a show like this.
Right.
So thank you.
Well, thank you.
But
I take that praise
I
for
want
what it's worth, which is significant.
I'm just so thankful that we have something like this here in San Diego. And I kind of wanted to, like, how did you even come up with this idea? Like, what where did it come out of? You know, it's a pretty audacious concept to bring such an important thing to a city like San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the idea is simple. I look back at my own development as an artist, and if I were to chart the most significant turning points, they would be lectures with artists. More so than formal education, more so than assignments and classes or paid gigs or any of that stuff. You know, and I could name individual moments in my life. And I knew that I was not unique in that. I mean, there's just no way that I was one of a few who would be transformed by being in the presence of somebody whose work I admire or have never heard of and am learning about through that living, breathing person. And so, you know, the community here didn't have a place that we could gather. And the community in Los Angeles does. And I wanted to expose more ideas to our audience. And I wanted to get people from LA to come here as well. And about 40% of our audience is from Los Angeles, and it's been that way since year one.
Yeah.
And, you know, that it makes me feel good, not that that's the goal, because it's not. But to give Angelenos a reason to leave Los Angeles is big.
Yeah.
I mean, you ask any Angeleno, and one of the joys, if there's somebody who enjoys living there, is the access that they have, you know, to arts, to culture, to architecture, to literature. You know, the list goes on. You can jump on a plane in Los Angeles and be taken anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And you can't do that in San Diego. So, you know, why does an Angeleno need to leave Los Angeles? In essence, they don't. I mean, of course, they do, because I think they are also enriched culturally enough to have a greater curiosity about the world that takes them other places. But, you know, we all live in Southern California. And when we come home to a pretty great place. But, you know, bringing Medium here, you know, San Diego it needs more of this.
Yeah, I agree.
And so you know, my idea was it was heady and it was risky, and it was worth trying.
Yeah.
And the first year, which you said you didn't attend.
No, the first year I did. It was the second
one
you did.
I didn't. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
The first one at the W downtown. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. You know, it blew my mind. I was like, who are all these people? Where did they come from? And, you know, there they were. And so, you know, it proved that there's a need for it. But what has developed out of it, my friendship with you, the community of people that gathers here. I mean, we've had people from 38 states and 6 countries now.
Wow.
Yeah. And now we do the exhibition, the Size Matters exhibition.
Yeah.
I think we've had submissions from 15 countries around the world. You know, so it grows. And ultimately what it does is it brings more perspectives here to San Diego.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I really, and this is something I know I'm not alone in this because this is what everybody says about Medium, but the thing that I really love so much about it is how it really does feel like a community coming together. It really, I don't personally have a lot of basis for comparison because I haven't been to very many other, I haven't been to any other portfolio review events.
Okay.
And I haven't really been to that many other, like photography festival type things. But I've always been very struck by how, and this wasn't the case in the first year because it was the first year, but like in subsequent years, like how I keep seeing the same people coming back over and over, and I get to catch up with them, people that I don't necessarily see the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But even at that first one, how it really, like one of the things I remember about that first one is that I got to meet Judith Fox. And just by happenstance, I had been, the summer before, I had been at MOPA and like browsing through the sort of, the bookshelves there, and they had one clearance copy of her book. I still do it was only the clearance copy because it was the last one and it was the like display copy.
Right. Yeah.
and I just got it. And it just broke me.
Yeah.
And so then I got a chance to meet her and talk to her. That was something that first year, I will never forget that, that I got a chance to sort of cry on her shoulder a little bit and make a connection, you know, and it was that way the whole 4 days that I'd meet all these people, whether they were like me and just starting out or whether they were people who were presenting, and it was all so supportive, something that I hear about some other big portfolio review events, which, I won't name, but, that a lot of times it just feels very competitive or very impersonal, people sort of elbowing each other out of the way at the review tables kind of thing, everybody hustling. It really never feels that way at Medium.
Yeah.
And I gotta think that a lot of that has to do with you, with the way that you've, built it.
Well, sure. I mean, to a degree, I think I'll take some of that credit. One of the other things that is funny about San Diego is it's what I call a flip-flop and fish taco town, right? It's where people want to just unplug, relax. It's the only place I've ever seen the little bumper stickers with 2 palm trees that say "No bad days." That's the mentality here. And it kind of drives me nuts because I think it lulls people into a kind of complacency that they don't want to go to Los Angeles. There's too much traffic. Oh God, I hate LA, or, whatever. Or just thinking that they have everything here.
Yeah.
And we do have a lot of great stuff here. But that was one of the ideas that I really thought about is, well, how can you take the flip-flop and fish taco attitude and maximize it for gain, right?
Yeah.
And the gain is that, it's a relaxing town. And if you get people to come here and relax and listen and engage with other smart people, there's a magic that can come from that. And I think that's part of what makes the portfolio review experience that which you describe. The other part is that it's small. It's sort of a long-standing joke that Medium is small. And that's something that I really enjoy the preservation of. I mean, I've been to many portfolio review events, as recently as 2 years ago. And I've enjoyed all the experiences that I've had there because some of the bigger ones that are more cutthroat, competitive, whatever, your opportunities are greater. It's like going to New York. You have more opportunities there. And I think there's a place for that. And I think there's a place for Medium and other regional festivals. I mean, Medium's not, it's regional on one level. It's very national in its participants and the reviewers, and increasingly international.
Yeah.
But, we've got flip-flops and we've got fish tacos and there's a pool outside.
Yeah.
And I think that really, it does set a kind of tone. Mm-hmm. I've always been fascinated when you can pull New Yorkers out of New York. Mm. They look just like us. Right? But when you're in New York, even if you're not a resident of New York, you've got your New York game on. Mm-hmm. You know? You're not just going to let somebody walk in front of you or, you know, cut you off in the street or whatever. I mean, you know, you have to have your New York game on. But, you know, again, that idea of bringing really smart, connected, influential people here and sort of unplugging maybe from their daily lives. This is true of all portfolio reviews, but, you know, doing so at a smaller event. Mm-hmm. It's been a good thing. Yeah. And of course the lectures and, you know, related events, which are an equal weight at Medium. Yeah. Whereas many other events, they're an auxiliary component or an optional one, or they just don't exist at all. Right. I mean, that's also something that makes the festival special. Yeah. I mean, I just, you know, I really look forward to it every year. And, you know, one of the things too that, you know, thinking about building up the arts community here, it's a conversation that I've had with a lot of people, and several people on the show, you know, talking about the San Diego arts community and what it is, what it could be. I think everybody sort of agrees that there's a lot of talent around this town. Yeah. And that there's a lot of potential, and we'd like to see things develop more. We'd like to see a more stable and, you know, arts market and collector base, that kind of thing. Right. But, you know, and there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of different kinds of things, but I still feel like it's fairly rare to see something really big. Like, you know, we say Medium is small, but, you know, in terms of its impact in San Diego, I mean, San Diego is some sort of seen as a small pool, I guess. But, you know, I think that what you're doing is it's a game changer here, you know, and that, you know, a lot of people will look around and see like, well, you know, it would be nice if we could have something like this or something like that, but then they don't do anything about it, you know? I think it's pretty impressive to see somebody actually go out there and do it. Yeah. It takes a lot of effort. Yeah, I bet. To do it. And, you know, for whatever reason, that's just part of my being. You know, whether it's that I'm restless or, I don't know, ADD or ADHD or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if I'm either of those. I don't think I am, actually. But, you know, I just want to do good in the world. And, you know, for me as an artist, it means pushing myself and discovering new things. And, you know, occasionally somebody's delighted by what you do. And that's the reward. And at some point, I don't know, I just went bigger. Yeah. And, you know, the results were worth it. Yeah. Because I see a lot of people who are grateful, you know, for the experience. I mean, the likes of which we've been talking about. Yeah. But that is the reward. I mean, you know, the very first year, I had countless strangers come up to me and look me in the eye and say, I just want to say thank you. And it was the weirdest thing because I had never had that experience before. I mean, I've been thanked for a lot of things in my life. You know, I've built a lot of exhibitions. I've, you know, whatever, you know, your professional background, you get thanked, right? Sometimes. And, you know, it feels good. We like to be thanked. I mean, it's a reward system, but that was different, you know, I mean, really, truly that experience of a stranger looking you in the eye and just saying, thank you for doing this. It was like, wow, this is really needed. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Good thing. Wow. We should take a little break and then we'll come back and do the second segment. Sure. Okay. That sounds good.
So for the second segment, I always ask my guests to bring a topic of their own, and that can be whatever's on your mind, whatever you'd like to talk about. So what would you like to talk about today?
Well, I thought about a number of different directions. Where could this go? Should I ask about, like, your childhood fears? Your day job? Raising kids? Or Mexico? And I thought, let's talk about Mexico.
Okay. What do you want to say? Talk about Mexico.
When was the last time you were in Mexico?
I've never been to Mexico.
My God.
With the one exception of, like, I was in the Mexico City airport once on a layover.
All right, let's change it. That's what we're going to talk about. No, it's interesting. Mexico is something, it's a place that I love.
Mm-hmm. And you were just there yesterday, right?
I was.
Yeah.
And I'll be there again on Saturday. And it's fascinating to me how many San Diegans don't access it.
Yeah.
There's a litany of reasons why, and I think they reside mostly in our minds.
Oh, yeah.
But Mexico is so amazing to me. And I guess I'm a kind of advocate for it.
Yeah.
For people to go. Because it's next door. And there is so much amazing culture there that is so mind-opening that, I don't know. It just, it's something that I think about a lot. And the more time I spend there, the more I want people in this region to think of it like visiting another country in Europe. Because it's really what it is. For us, right? Mm-hmm. This goes back to that place of privilege. Like, we have that privileged position to just cross the border.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And increasingly, I've made a lot of friends who live there.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, friendships come with their own reward, right?
Mm.
And so sometimes I can visit friends in Mexico. But going for exhibitions and going for dinner and going to have culturally enriching experiences is so amazing. So you got to go. This weekend.
Yeah. I think I might have a protest or something to go to this weekend, but we'll see.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Last weekend there was a protest in Mexico.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be binational.
Yeah.
And it was actually a concert.
Mm.
And the U.S. government shut down the U.S. side of that protest concert.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. It's not why I was there, but it was one of those things that made me realize how many opportunities we have, to experience culture.
Yeah.
There and here, right?
Yeah. And
it's a lot like we were talking about listening to podcasts or subscribing to podcasts, and we can very easily amass more content to listen to than we have time to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I guess you introduce a whole other country and a whole other culture, and that becomes true too. I was in Mexico. I drove through Playas, the neighborhood where the protest happened,
mm-hmm.
or the concert happened, and I still didn't have the time to go.
Yeah.
But I was there for a different reason.
Yeah. I think it's, it's funny. I think that in San Diego, I seem to run into people who, if you say you've never been to Mexico,
mm-hmm.
you only get two possible responses.
Right, yeah.
The one response is, like, oh, yeah, I never go there either. And
right.
The other response is like, why? You really need to.
Uh-huh.
I think there is this really fascinating sort of psychological thing about the border that, I've lived in California my whole life, but originally I'm from Northern California, from outside of Monterey, and then I went to college in L.A. County, and I shortly after that lived in Orange County, but even like all of those places, there's some awareness of that we border with Mexico,
right?
But living in San Diego made me aware of this separation that I didn't really think about it in the same way before, because when you live here, I think it can be very easy to forget exactly how close it is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That every time I get, because I don't make it south of, like, I don't know, Barrio Logan very often, and I don't even make it that far south very often.
Right.
But every time I get down, towards National City or whatever, Chula Vista, and you start seeing the signs that are like, 7 miles to the international border, and you're like, this is really not that far from where I live. But psychologically, you still think of Mexico as being removed. And I just find that so fascinating. It's something that, like, even I think about it all the time, but I still forget all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The funny thing is south of the border, that psychology doesn't exist.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
And the most profound experiences that I've had in Mexico are in Playas, which is the beach community of Tijuana. It's the neighborhood at the beach. Because you are next to the wall in Playas, and there's lots of people on the beach. There are weddings happening, quinceañeras. There's restaurants. There's just people relaxing, having a good time.
Yeah.
And they're totally unconcerned about that wall. And their side of the wall is covered with art, with murals that are changing all the time. And you can see through it there. The nature of the wall is that water can move through it, so you can see through it also. And there's nothing on the other side except green and white vehicles driving by men with guns.
Yeah.
And it's like you can feel that difference of, on the U.S. side, there's fear, there's security, there's, concerns for safety. Of who? Of Mexicans? Of thieves? Right? I mean, we don't need to go there.
Yeah.
But when you're in Mexico, you're not seeing or experiencing any of that. Yeah. Any of the things that people in El Norte are concerned about.
Yeah.
Right? They're concerned about what's happening south of the border. You are south of the border, and you don't witness any of that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But, talking about what you said, the psychology of not even acknowledging it, realizing it's there, thinking much about it until you're closer to it, and then you're like, oh, wow, there's a country there.
Yeah. Well, and just thinking about, too, like I was talking to Paul Tourné for the show a while back, and, so much of his work is about the border.
Right.
But, like, it really sort of... In my mind, and I'm sure in lots of people's mind, there is this separation, but even in the areas where there isn't a literal fence, right?
Right.
But when you take a step back from it and just look at the landscape, it's exactly it's the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
It just, I don't know. There's something about that. It's just so weird to. I like to think of myself as a pretty open-minded guy.
Sure.
As like a pretty, lefty progressive kind of guy.
Yeah.
But, it's weird how these things operate on you, and having that sort of being faced with that, it's kind of a profound thing.
Yeah. It sort of goes back to photography for me and the notion of discovery. I love that. I love the discovery of it. This weekend, I almost died twice in a car.
Wow.
Once was somebody else's attempt to kill me, and the other was my attempt to kill myself. Not literally, of course, but right. So one was chance. The other was ignorance, stupidity on my part. And, it really became kind of a vivid reminder of what I love about it is that it's different. The stop signs there are faded, and they're off to the side. They're not put in, like, Caltrans locations in a traffic island.
Yeah.
It might be over on the other side of the sidewalk. Or the stoplights might be kind of not cranking at full juice. You know, I mean, things are subtle, and it's like, you know, you realize I'm in a different country. There are different norms here.
Yeah.
You know, if I were to magically transport my vehicle to New Delhi, and I had to drive in New Delhi, it would be very different, right? The norms would be different.
Yeah.
They still have rules, be they written or unwritten, and you have to navigate those.
Yeah.
And it's no different in Mexico. And so, you know, the near-death experiences were kind of also that reminder of like, oh yeah, like you can't just drive the way that you do.
Yeah.
You have to, you know, and you're in a place that, you know, maybe you don't know like the back of your hand. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot changes
Yeah.
down there.
I think it's so interesting too, because like, especially as I've come to know the art scene here. I mean, like I say, I haven't been to Tijuana or anywhere else in Mexico, but that's something that's come up a lot when I talk to people who are from here, you know, who part of the arts community here,
right.
is how much how much communication there is in the arts between here and Tijuana, which of course it makes sense. We're literally right next door to each other.
Right.
And I don't know, the whole border thing is so, it's politically so sort of high voltage, you know, especially right now. But I mean, you know, nationally right now it's a bigger thing than it has been.
Right.
But here in San Diego, it's always been part of the conversation.
Right.
And it's one of those things where you have these people on one side who are very afraid, and, you know, militia people who want to go out there and, you know, the Minutemen or whatever. And then on the other hand, you have people who are like, no, let's get more cooperation. Let's get more communication. That this is our strength. I just think it's such a fascinating thing to see how all of that stuff plays out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is. You know, there's a photography festival in Tijuana.
I've heard that. I've heard that it's very good.
It is. Yeah, this is the second year. They're doing it every 2 years.
Yeah.
So 2015 was their first year, and this will be the second year. And, you know, they do a lot. They have lectures, they have workshops, they have exhibitions. And, you know, we partner with them and increasingly are working together to, you know, to help their mission. And they, in 2015, they did a tour, a bus tour, that I would encourage you to think about if they do it in 2017, which I'm not sure if they're planning it, but I would imagine they would be, because it was really successful. And they went to studios, they went to exhibitions. We had lunch at Hotel Cesar, where the Caesar salad was invented. It was great. It was really, really, really great. Yeah, so something else to think about.
Yeah.
A good reason to go down there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons.
I know there are. Yeah, there are. But I understand the limitations of, you know, it's not an easy city to navigate, like physically or otherwise.
I've even had people, like actually one of the really early guests on this show, her name is Pastilla. She just said, hey, no, I'll take you down there anytime.
Yeah.
I never got around to taking her up on it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I do need to do that. I really do.
Yeah, put it on your list.
So, we've been going a while.
Sure.
We should probably close soon. But the last thing that I like to ask everyone, and I just spring the question on everyone, is whether there has been a piece of art or literature or just general creativity that you've experienced recently that meant something to you.
That meant something to me. I mean, the answer is unquestionably yes. The question is, what, you know, which one do I pull out? For me personally, I think Eric Orr's Zero Mass, which was exhibited at MCASD a few years ago. That has stuck with me in amazing ways. It's virtually a black room, and it's an experiential piece of art that's really all about your perception and your inability to perceive, and it really changed me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I carry that with me, I guess, a lot, and when I see other works of art, I don't compare them to it by any means, but I think its ability to just strip a lot of preconceived notions about experiencing a piece of art has helped me experience other art in a greater way. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
it's such a rare thing when you can find anything that can move you like that and really stay with you. But
there's something happening through the end of July called Wonder Spaces in Mission Valley, of all places, and it's about a dozen installation experiential works of art, and there's one in there by Adam Belt that reminded me of Zero Mass. He has created a dark room and literally mapped the sky using one of the star apps. He literally recreated the sky, poking holes in things and letting light shine through it. It's extraordinary.
Wow.
It's so cool. It really is. And it's an amazing thing for families too. Like, it's such an easy gateway into installation art. I mean, it's made to be accessible and a good gateway.
Yeah.
I don't have kids, but I mean, I just thought, like, man, this is the first place I would be bringing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they would enjoy
kids,
it.
So
yeah, I know.
Installations it's funny because, I tend, just the nature of what I personally do and who I know and talk to, I tend not to think a lot about installations as much. I spend more of my time thinking about other mediums.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting because, just by nature of the episode that I was editing this morning, by the time this goes out, it will have aired several weeks ago, the episode with Kinsey Moreland, where we were talking about kids and art and accessibility, and how it can be real difficult to get kids even just into a space with sort of more cutting edge contemporary art.
Right.
Because those spaces aren't really designed for younger people.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really thought about installations as being, because they're so, site oriented and they're usually bigger.
Right.
Like that. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's something that you really could involve, more all age groups. That's really cool. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. There's a lot of interactive pieces at Wonder Spaces that are very kid-friendly.
Cool.
And then there's others that you're not supposed to touch.
Right.
That are experiential in a different way.
Right.
And there's a VR one, which I actually didn't get to experience. But, yeah, it's worth it.
Cool.
Yeah, it's worth a visit for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so one more time. This year's Medium Festival of Photography will be at the Lafayette Hotel in San Diego, California from October 26th to the 29th. I will be there, and I hope to see lots of familiar faces there and meet some new friends. If you decide to join in, please do say hi and submit to the Size Matters exhibition. And that's our show for this week. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me at podcast@keepthechanneleopen.com. You can also follow me and the show on Twitter @ChannelOpenPod or on Facebook at facebook.com/keepthechanneleopen. If if you'd like to help support the show, you can subscribe to our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/sakeriver. That's patreon.com/sakeriver. Sake like the drink and river like river. And subscribers at any amount, they get access to the show a day early. Your donations are what keep the show going. So if you like what you're hearing, maybe chip in $1 or $2 a month. It really helps out a lot. You can also help out the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, and there's a link in the show notes for that as well. Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. Next week, our guest will be gallerist Jennifer DiCarlo of JDC Fine Art, so stay tuned for that. And until then, remember, keep the channel open.